We're live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special council meeting for Monday, September the 21st. This meeting will be held electronically in accordance with Section 238, sub 3.1 of the Municipal Act, which provides that a member of council, committee, or either of them can participate electronically. In-person attendance at this meeting will not be permitted. Members of the public may observe the proceedings by accessing the live webcast on the Town of Shelburne YouTube page. And this document also is available in other accessible formats and with communication supports as necessary as soon as practicable and upon request. So with that, I'll call tonight's special meeting to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Don't see any. So we have sort of a two-part session this evening. We have the special meeting, which includes two statutory public meetings, the first being a development charges public meeting. The second is a Planning Act meeting. There's also some Planning Act matters for consideration. Once that portion is done, we'll adjourn the special meeting, and then we'll convene a committee of adjustment and deal with two consent applications for that committee. Now, there are two items on the special meeting agenda dealing with Flato developments. Those are items number 4 and 5 on the agenda. There are some additional staff reports that council is going to be receiving next Monday night at our regular council meeting on September 28th, some of which has or may have at least a bearing on some of the discussions that I anticipate to unfold with respect to the two Flato items. So as a result of that, I'm going to propose that those two items be deferred until next Monday evening at the regular council meeting, and then council can at least have all of the information that we need to have a fruitful discussion. So Jennifer, you require a motion to defer?
That's correct, yes.
So I'll move that items number 4 and 5 on the special agenda, items number 4 and 5 under items for consideration be deferred to the regular council meeting to be held September 28th.
I'll second the motion.
Second.
Okay, second by Councillor Bonato. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, carried. Thank you. So I just wanted to get that out of the way up front in case there were any Flato individuals on the call that were just sticking around for that. So if so, and there's no other reason for them to be on, then they can join us next Monday night. So with that, we will move on to the development charge public meeting. Tonight's public meeting being held pursuant to the Development Charges Act is to receive a presentation from Hemson Consulting regarding proposed development charge rates and policies that will be applied to the west area of town. It is proposed that the enactment of development charges bylaw by council will occur at a date subsequent to tonight's public meeting. Council is required under the Development Charges Act to hold at least one public meeting to allow the public an opportunity to review and provide comments on the West Area Development Charges background study, related staff reports, as well as proposed development charges bylaw. I'll ask the clerk to provide the method of notice for tonight's public meeting.
Notice of tonight's public meeting was advertised in local newspapers as of August 20th, 2020. Notice was posted on the town's website and social media sites as of August 20th, 2020.
Okay. So we're going to have a presentation from Craig and Natalia from Hemson, and after that there'll be an opportunity for members of the public as well as members of council to provide any comments or ask any questions. So Craig, Natalia, you guys can take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. My colleague Natalia Kalbas is going to do the presentation this evening. I'll just want to stress that this is the formal statutory public meeting under the requirements of the Development Charges Act. And perhaps just to head off an initial question, some of you may be aware that some of the legislation that's changed in the Development Charges Act came into force on Friday, this past Friday. None of those changes influence or impact on the type of charges that we're presenting this evening, but we'd be pleased to answer any questions with respect to those changes at the end of our presentation. And with that, I'll just pass it over to Natalia, but also note that Steve Weaver, who's been working on this project with us, is also available to assist in answering any of the technical engineering related questions.
Great. Thanks, Craig. I appreciate the introduction. It's a pleasure to be before Council once again this evening. As Craig mentioned, this is the statutory public meeting as required under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act. And the primary purpose is to provide an opportunity to make representation by the public on the West Area background study and bylaw. Just to note, the background study has been made publicly available as of July 29th of 2020, and the bylaw was made publicly available on September 6th of this year. Through the presentation, I'm going to just cover some background information in case there's any members of the public joining us today that might not have as much of background knowledge on development charges. As Craig mentioned, some provincial legislation update. You'll note the slide that I have provided in this presentation is now out of date as of Friday of last week. Just a bit of context about the rates and how they are situated in the geographic context of the town. Overview of the study process. We'll take a look at the development forecast for the West area, the development charge services, and the capital program that is being recovered for under these charges. And lastly, the calculated development charge rates and the next steps. So if anybody has joined us tonight who isn't aware, development charges are fees imposed on development to finance development related capital costs. So as a municipality grows, there's new infrastructure that's required to service that growth, and that is what the development charges are levied for. For the West area, it is a delineated geographic area, and only that area will pay the calculated rates that are presented in this presentation. Those rates are in addition to the town-wide rate that has been previously presented to Council and passed earlier this year. So as I mentioned, we had previously brought forward a town-wide development charge study that included 2 other area-specific charges that do not overlap with the West area that has been calculated. The West area charge is a new charge. It is not an update to an existing one. It is brand new. I won't talk too much about the slide, but as Craig mentioned, the legislative update is that Bill 197 did come into force as of Friday of last week. And as Craig mentioned, this does not have an impact on the rates that were calculated for tonight's meeting. But if you do have any questions, Council, we're pleased to answer those. So the context map of the town, as you can see, there's the east area on the right-hand side, as well as the school road. And the area that we are focusing on tonight is the west area, which is in red on the left-hand side. And zooming in a little bit closer onto that area, you can see that there's 2 separate sub-areas within it, the West Area B and West Area A. So West Area A is the red polygon in the bottom of the map, and West Area A and B is outlined in black. So the rates are calculated for both of those sub-areas. The development charge study process, Council has seen this slide multiple times, but just to reiterate, if there's anybody joining us, the way development charges are calculated is firstly, we establish a development forecast. In this case, it is just for the West area, both residentially and non-residentially. We have forecasted the amount, type, and location of the development. We did not need to do a historical service level, as this is an area-specific charge, and it is not a general service, it's an engineered service. We then identify the growth-related capital needs that are required to service the growth. There were no grants and no replacement or benefit to existing in this case. It was all new infrastructure. There are no available DCs at the time, as this is a brand new development charge rate. And it was determined that the forecast is to build out. So there is no end time date for the forecast, and therefore no post-period benefit has been attributed to the costs. And then we took the costs that are eligible for DC recovery and assign those to either the residential sector or the non-residential sector. And you'll see we did it on a per unit basis, similarly as we did the townwide and the area specific rates. And for the non-residential sector, once again, we did that on a per square meter of gross floor area. The development forecast that was included in the background study, as I mentioned, is from 2020 to build out. And we did it on 2 areas, the West Area A and West Area B. For West Area A, it includes the Stella Jones development, which is in that red polygon to the south of the site. And West Area B includes commercial and residential developments in Highland Village and some other developers. As you'll see, the majority of the development is forecasted to be in the residential side, with just some minor employment of about 4.1% in the West Area A and 1.9% in West Area B. The services that we are recovering for under the West Area Development Charge rates is for the external force main and sewer. So this is for West Area A, the internal force main and Highway 89 improvements, and the costs are included as well. And for West Area B, it is for the sanitary pumping station, excluding the washroom, which will be covered under the Parks Recreation rates coming forward later in the year. The calculated development charge rates for the West Area are as follows. So I will take you through the top table first, which is for the residential rates. In the bottom two rows is the total charge for Area A for single semi-detached unit would be $1,593. For other multiples, it would be $1,275. For apartments of 2 or more bedrooms, it would be $903. And for apartments of 1 bedroom or less, it would be $619. For Area B, they would pay both the Area A and Area B calculated rates. And the total for that comes out to $4,198, $3,360 for other multiples, $2,379 for apartments with 2 or more bedrooms, and $1,631 for apartments with 1 bedroom or less. The non-residential rates are in the table below, and the total for Area A is $4.24 per square meter. And the total charge for Area B, which pays for both Area A and B charges, is $18.79. And to wrap up my fairly brief presentation tonight, the next steps for the West Area bylaw is the passage date is currently September 28th, 2020, and the rates would come into effect on that date. And following that, we would circulate notice of bylaw passage within 20 days. So from today until the September 28th, we have a bit of time to respond to any comments or questions received tonight or up until that day. So this formally ends my presentation, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thanks, Natalia. Any person may participate in the public meeting tonight, and both written and verbal communications will be accepted, either in support of or in opposition to the bylaw. Written submissions were invited to be directed to the clerk by September the 16th. Written comments received prior to the meeting and submissions made at the public meeting tonight will be considered by council prior to the enactment of the new development charges bylaw. Jennifer, did we receive any comments to date?
Written submission was received by Groundswell Urban Planners. The town planner and Hempson Consulting has a copy of those submissions.
Okay. Should point out as well that a copy of the West Area Development Charges background study and subsequent draft bylaw are available on the town's website. Are there any other members of the public, Jennifer, that are on to speak to this tonight?
You have a representative from Tribute. I'm not sure if Susan has a question. Other than that, no other questions have been received.
Okay. Is Susan just watching, or did she have a comment to make? Just watching? Okay. All right, then I will open it up to council. Are there any questions or comments for Hempson from council members? Councillor Buffett. Oh, you're muted, Linda.
Sorry about that. Yeah, my question is regarding the actual area in the west where we have the protrusion of on the far west of that corner there. When I thought the built boundary in the west area started at the top corner of the triangle and went straight down. So there's a whole section there that appears to be outside of the built boundary. And I'm just wondering why that is.
I think that's probably a Steve Weaver question.
Yeah, so I'm, wait for it.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So when the pumping station was designed, a drainage area for that pumping station was determined, and it does, obviously some thought was given to how that pumping station could best accommodate not only the Highland Village development within which it is located, but also surrounding properties, either that have development potential in the future or have existing homes on septic systems. And so some of the land, as Councillor Buffett has pointed out, is just west of the current urban area boundary, but has existing homes with septic systems on it, on those properties. So as a long-term possibility, those properties could be connected to the system or redeveloped. And that redevelopment then would be required to be on full municipal services. Obviously, that would be contingent upon the land being brought into the urban area boundary through the municipal comprehensive review that the county is embarking on, and amendments to both the town and the county official plan, updates to the secondary plan for the Shelburne West area as well, and would also be ultimately determined through a servicing master plan update. So there are some boxes that still need to be checked in order to allow servicing, that far west into those existing residential properties. But again, just making sure the infrastructure is designed with a long-term perspective in mind, that possibility has been accounted for and has been factored into the DC calculation as well.
Councillor Bernardo?
My question is in regards to the September 28th date. So Tribute's currently building. Any applications they have before September 28th are under the old development charges. Anything after September 28th is under the new development charges. Is that correct?
So that's correct. The new development charge would apply to further municipal approvals issued for building permits after the date of passage. So there are a number of units that already have building permits or already built that have paid the old development charge rate, either under the 2015 bylaw or the new 2020 townwide bylaw that was passed a number of months ago. Much of the infrastructure that is captured in this West area DC has already been constructed by Tribute. In fact, almost all of it is completed or will be completed as part of this subdivision. The only part that has not been and will not as part of this subdivision is the external force main. So what there would be as part of the reimbursement to Tribute for the works that they've already paid for through the DC credit process on permits going forward, there would be an adjustment to account for units that are connected to these systems that have already been built to make sure that every unit has paid its a corresponding per unit cost based on the units that have been calculated.
Okay, my second question is regarding parkland. With the new rules that are in place, we can no longer ask for parkland. They have to give us cash or whatever in a credit because of the, I forget the exact name for it. That does not apply to what's currently being done. That would apply to anything in the future after September 28th, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I may need to refer this question to Craig. He probably's got a better understanding on the recent Development Charge Act and Planning Act amendments that are recently in effect. But my understanding is that if the town does not take up the new community benefits charge system, which is only for certain types of development, high density development is what it would be considered in the town. 5 stories or higher and 10 plus residential units. That would have a different payment process as it relates to parkland, but anything else that's not under that community benefits process would still have the traditional 5% land dedication or cash in lieu at council's discretion. So at this point, maybe I'll just turn it to Craig in case I've missed anything there.
Yes, just through the mayor. Steve's correct. Really, the province ended up changing back the legislation that was going to reform the Planning Act in the way that municipalities can acquire parkland or cash in lieu. And basically, we've reverted back to the old rules, so it's unchanged. There are some additional requirements if you're going to seek to use what's called the alternative rate under the cash in lieu provisions, but you have 2 years over which to consider those changes and implement a new parkland dedication cash in lieu bylaw. So everything really remains unchanged. And even if you choose to implement a CBC bylaw, it is in addition to what you do through parkland dedication and cash in lieu. It's no longer a one or the other. So all of those changes were quite good for municipalities, especially those like Shelburne. You can just stay the course for now.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Okay, I'll put out one last call then for any questions or comments from members of the public. Not seeing anything? Okay. Okay, then I'll ask for a motion to receive the presentation from Hemson and Consulting. Mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Bonato. All in favor? Carried. Excellent. Thanks, guys. See you soon. Okay, so next is the planning public meeting. So tonight's public meeting under section 34 of the Planning Act is to consider an application for a zoning bylaw amendment for lands municipally known as 331 Victoria Street. The purpose and effect of the amendment is to rezone the property from residential type 2, which is known as the R2 zone, to residential type 4 exception, which is known as the R4 exception zone. I'll ask the clerk for the method of notice for tonight's planning public meeting.
Notice of tonight's public meeting was posted by sign on site of the subject property September 1st, 2020. Notice is posted on the town's website, and notice was provided to property owners within a 12-meter radius.
Okay, thank you. Have a presentation.
Sorry, 120 meters.
Okay. So we'll have a presentation by the town planner, following which there will be an opportunity for members of the public as well as members of council to ask questions and to provide comments. The clerk will also accept written submissions. All submissions, written and oral, will be given consideration by council prior to any decisions being made. For those who wish to receive notice of council's decision or of any further actions on that matter, I ask that you please contact the clerk by email, which is at jwilloughby@shelburne.ca. So Steve, ask you to walk us through your report.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I've shared a presentation that contains some graphics to assist with the public meeting. Can everyone see the presentation okay? Okay. So this application is number Z2001 for the property at 331 Victoria Street. And the applicant is Sandy Brown, and Sandy is in attendance as well. And between the two of us, we'll endeavor to answer any questions that members of the public and council may have. So just to orient ourselves, the subject property is located at the northeast corner of Victoria and Mill Street. You can see that there is an existing home on the front of the property oriented towards Victoria Street. And the backyard, which is the proposed severed lot, is located at the corner of Mill Street and an existing public rear lane. Couple of quick pictures here from street view just to illustrate the current conditions. So the first top left image illustrates the existing home, looking at it from the corner of Victoria and Mill, looking northeast. You can see that the home is tucked up closer to the corner. There is some existing, an existing mature tree, smaller vegetation closer to the right of way, and some existing fencing on the corner as well. And then the bottom right picture illustrates the view looking more northwest from the corner of Mill Street and the rear lane being on the right. There is an existing driveway on the neighboring property to the east, but no access currently from the rear lane for the subject property. There are some, it's hard to see here with the trees at the back of the property, but there is an existing shed at the back of the property, and obviously an existing fence along the rear and side lot line. Yeah, I should note that these pictures are a couple years dated, so I did not get an opportunity to get out and see them in the current condition, but I do have pictures from the applicant. Some things may have changed since then. So the proposed rezoning involves both the proposed severed and retained lot. We're doing things in a little bit different order tonight than in the past, where you would have seen the Committee of Adjustment application for consent first. In this case, the zoning is being presented first, but it ties directly to the proposed consent. So later on in the Committee of Adjustment agenda, we'll have a public meeting for the related consent application, which, as I mentioned, is proposing to sever the back half of the property as a new residential lot. And the retained land would continue to have the existing home on it. So in order to recognize that existing home on the property and to apply lot standards that fit with the proposed retained lot, rezoning would be required to R4 from R2. The uses permitted are the same in both of the zones. Site-specific provisions would be required to recognize the existing setbacks of the existing dwelling. So right now, the existing dwelling, based on the survey provided, is 4.5 meters from the front lot line, and the porch is 2.8 meters from the front lot line. Normally, for a brand new dwelling on a vacant lot in a new subdivision, for example, the standard setback would be 6 meters to the front of the house from the front lot line. In this case, it's an existing condition, and similar to other recent severances of corner lots, we recommend recognizing those existing conditions for the existing home. The minimum exterior side yard as well, so that's the side yard facing Mill Street, is a bit less than what's required under the R2 and R4 zones. Normally it's 3 meters in the R4 zone, so a small reduction is requested there to 2.9 meters. Again, just to recognize the positioning of the existing dwelling and the existing yard. So that's it in terms of the rezoning for the existing home and retained land. For the proposed new severed lot at the back of the property, a different site-specific zone, R4-9, is requested. That would have, again, a reduced front yard, a reduced interior, an increased interior side lot line on both sides. So normally the R2 zone requires 1.2 meters on each side of a house in an interior lot context. In the R4 zone, it's 1.2 meters on one side and 0.6 meters on the other. In this case, basically to compensate for the smaller front and rear yards and to accommodate required parking for the dwelling, which is one space, we're recommending that the minimum side yard on the west side, so adjoining this dash line here, would be 3.7 meters. And on the east side, adjoining the lane to the east, would be 6.1 meters. The minimum rear yard would be reduced from 7.5 meters to 3.9 meters. So this would maintain a very similar building footprint as the setbacks of the existing house, except that it would have wider interior side yards, west and east. But in terms of the building footprint along Mill Street, as well as the distance to the north. Okay, and I just realized I may have been a slide ahead of myself. Sorry about that. Here, this chart just summarizes the zone standards for which some relief is requested. So in this table, we've summarized the standard R4 zone, the proposed standards for the retained lot, and the proposed standards for the severed lot. And you can see we've highlighted in gray where there's some differences. Again, 6 meters is the standard, but for the existing dwelling on the retained lot would be 4.5 meters for the dwelling and 2.8 meters for the porch. That's an existing condition. And on the severed lot would be 3.8 meters for a new house. The exterior side yard, again, along Mill Street for the existing house would be 2.9 meters, which is the existing condition. And then finally, the minimum rear yard for a new house on the severed lot would be 3.9 meters instead of 7.5, but with the increased interior side yards as noted, which are shown here. I just wanted to highlight as well in terms of the area zoning context. The site is identified in blue. You can see the area has a mix of R2 and R4 zones. Again, they reflect the same permitted uses, primarily single detached and semi-detached dwellings. But also R4 allows reduced lot standards, so smaller lot size and smaller side yards, and a smaller, narrower lot frontage as well. So you can see there's an R4 lot across the street on Victoria here. A couple of years ago, a similar corner lot severance was granted at the southwest corner of Wellington and Victoria. So that's 208 Victoria. That has been rezoned to 2 site-specific R4 zones, very similar to what's proposed on this property. And then directly to the south of Mill Street, again, highlighted in yellow here, is 411 Victoria Street, which was severed into a semi-detached dwelling a year or two ago. A bit further south, it's a little off the map, but at Franklin and Victoria, an existing property has also been severed into 4 lots, a corner lot for semi-detached units. So there has been a history of some corner lot severances kind of filling out the area. And then finally, this is the severance plan that accompanies both the zoning and severance application. We've just highlighted in red the standards that do not meet the R4 zone standards. So those are the site-specific standards that we're talking about. The existing home is outlined here on the green retained lot. It would meet the minimum rear yard requirements, but it would have a reduced front yard over here on Victoria and a reduced side yard over here on Mill Street. And then the lot to the east, the new severed lot, would have a reduced front yard of 3.8 meters oriented to Mill Street and a reduced rear yard of 3.9 meters, but again, wider side yards on each side. So to represent a similar lot coverage for both lots. And that's the end of my presentation. We did receive some additional comments since my report was submitted for the agenda, and I just wanted to make note of those before we move on to the public meeting portion and public comments. Bear with me while I pull those up. So we received a handwritten letter from Brad and Nancy Kendrew of 327 Victoria Street. The comments read as follows, and I'll just read directly from the letter. We do not want the proposal of a severance at 331 Victoria Street to build a single unit dwelling. We live beside 331 Victoria Street. We do not want any more flooding from this property, which we already have had. Also, we don't want our sewer line disrupted because it already runs beside 331 sewer line. Plus, if you build a 2-story house in the backyard, we will not have any privacy in our backyard. Also, it will be taking too much of the green spaces away from our town. There is another few comments from other residents of the area. Ross Johnson of 104 Mill Street submitted as follows: as per lot division, I think this is a very poor thing to start. If you make this an example, there will be many more want to do it. So that one's that submission. Peter Scott of 316 Victoria Street submitted as follows: I strongly oppose this proposal to sever and build a single unit dwelling located at 331 Victoria Street, as it will not be compatible with current neighboring lot sizes and will negatively impact the streetscape. In addition to this, I feel that the proposal will destabilize the character of this older and established neighborhood and will immediately impact the value of neighboring properties. We also received a written submission from Neil Clark of 323 Victoria Street, and it simply says, do not want property divided. Another submission, this one from Richard Lewis of 101 Mill Street. It reads, increased traffic objection, eyesore, decreased property values. Too many Band-Aids on water main on Mill Street. Too much of lot is covered with new proposal. Setback should be maintained. And then finally, from this group of submissions, Fred and Debbie Mason of 412 Victoria Street submitted as follows: we do not want anything changed on that lot. The lot is small, too small to put a house on it. I do have one other public comment to read into the record as well. This was received today via email from Ida Cunningham of 319 Victoria Street. And her email reads, as a neighboring property, I would like to say that I'm not in favor of this application. I feel it would lower the property values in the neighborhood, and it is a totally unnecessary use of the property. These homes were planned with decent backyards, and for one person to take the backyard of the property and make a second dwelling is completely against the principle of the original intent of the area. The property would be far too small for proper enjoyment, and it's overcrowding the area. We have the townhomes if you want to live on top of your neighbors. Again, I am not in favor of this proposal. End quote. So those are the written submissions we received from members of the public as of today. Of course, we're here to receive any other further comments from members of the public at the public meeting. We've also received some additional agency comments through the circulation. There were no concerns or objections raised through the additional agency comments received from the County of Dufferin, from the school boards, and I think that's it. I think those are the only additional submissions that we received since the report was submitted. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions that are raised through the public meeting and my council. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Just in terms of process, I think there are some members of the public that are on here who may have comments as well with respect to the committee of adjustment matter that we're going to consider later. Are you okay sort of fielding a mix of questions or comments at this point, so that they don't, I mean, if they want to stay on for the rest of the meeting, they're more than welcome, but then at least they won't feel obligated to stay on until towards the end of the meeting when we get to the committee of adjustment portion.
Yes, I think that's a good approach, and we will just note that the comments apply to both of the applications, and they are related. The written submissions that I just read into the record as well did not exactly specify which of the two applications they pertain to, so we would read that as they pertain to both.
Sure. Okay. All right. I do see that Lisa Kendrew's on here. Lisa, are you with your dad?
I am. He's right here.
I thought I saw him on the corner there too. So hi, Brad. How you doing?
I'm ready.
All right. So yeah, go ahead, Lisa or Brad. Any questions or comments?
Lisa will speak. Wade.
All right. Fair enough.
So it's really nice to hear that all of the neighbors' concerns have already been made public. I think that was our primary concern, that we really wanted to make sure that the area residents have been heard. My dad has, had the opportunity to speak to a lot of the residents in the area, and sadly, there is a perception that the decisions have already been made. So I would just ask the council to take some serious consideration in what the residents of the area have said. They're long-term residents of this street. I grew up here. My parents have been here over 40 years, along with a lot of the residents who have also worked in this community and supported Shelburne and paid taxes for many years. So I think that they've earned that right. So at the end of the day, I think that that's our primary concern, is to just really take note of what the residents have taken the time to write to all of you, and to really consider whether or not this severance is necessary. And really, I think all of us are trying to preserve a community so that it doesn't rapidly turn into a Toronto. We have grown up in an area where we just don't have a post-stamp backyard. We have the luxury of having the aesthetics of this beautiful community and don't want that disrupted. So thank you very much for listening to us today.
Lisa, just while you're online there, your mom and dad raised 2 points in their letter that Steve just read into the record there. One was with respect to flooding, and the other, I believe, was with respect to the sewage line. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe provide a bit more detail on what the concerns are there.
So I mean, with respect to the flooding, it is something that's currently happening today. Just with the natural drainage the way it is right now, it needs to be fixed. But I think the concern is that if another dwelling is to appear in the backyard, that's going to then grade into my parents' property, which is obviously a significant concern. As you know, my dad's worked for the town for many, many years and has since retired from working on the town and understands the sewage system quite well. And knows where those lines run. So once again, just wanting to make sure that nothing disrupts and damages their property in general. But I think those are just side points, because we all know that engineers can work through those kinds of things. It's more about the aesthetics and disrupting the entire neighborhood.
Okay. Councillor Bernardo, I see your hand there. Just before we open it up to council, I just want to see if there's any additional public comments. Jennifer, is there anybody else signed on?
No, sir, there's not.
Okay. Councillor Bernardo, you're up.
Well, I wanted to ask Brad, because I've been to his place and I've seen the backyard, and there's quite a low-lying area towards the very back of the yard, and that, I'm guessing, where the flooding is happening towards there. Your worry is building, and if that lot was severed and building an additional home, it would just, depending on the grading, create more flooding into that lower-lying area, not only behind your house, but behind some of your neighbors' houses as well. Am I correct in that thought process?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, thank you. That was the one question I wanted for Brad, because I know I've been back there and I know what it's like in the back area where he lives.
You're quite right, Walter.
Yes, thank you for articulating that.
Yes, indeed.
But before I jump on to any further questions, Sandy, did you have any comments specifically with respect to the flooding issue or potential flooding issue?
Well, I know that whenever a new build like this is proposed, that the requirements for a topographical survey, the requirements for flood mitigation and grading will be reviewed by town staff or by county staff, and that will all be part of the application process and the approval process before anything's built there. So I certainly don't want to be part of causing any flooding in a neighborhood property. I think the property, this particular home, has been in that state for over 100 years now. The grading has been that way for over 100 years. This is an opportunity to correct the problem, and that's what will happen if a new home is built there. The grading issue will be resolved, and your town staff will ensure that that happens. I have a couple other comments if I could.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting. you know, there's more to this than just the home being built. I'm going to go back to December 2016. My son was traveling at the time, my son Spencer, and he's been in front of your council before. And I as a fellow in his mid-20s, I thought it was time for maybe him to get involved in real estate. So I reached out to him when 220 William Street came up for sale at a very attractive price. I went to look at it, and as some of you know, I'm a realtor, and I contacted him, and I thought maybe this is the where to start. A very low price home, needed a lot of elbow grease, and so I helped him buy that house. We spent the summer of 2017 renovating it. We put about $70,000 into that particular property. We created 2 residential units, a 3-bedroom unit and a bachelor suite. And then we went on to sever that lot as well. After that, I purchased 221 Owen Sound Street. We rezoned that one, turned it into a triplex, and spent $200,000 renovating that home from top to bottom. And that was also severed. We're in the midst of that right now. We're some sewer realignment about to happen. Then my son and a friend went over to 208 Victoria Street. They created a duplex there. I have also helped my son at 218 Greenwood Street. There was they've got a triplex there, again, another severance. So when I add all of this up, including the fact that on the severed lots, there's likely going to be duplexes put in there. We're talking about 22 residential units on what was previously 5 lots in town. This is what intensification does. This is in the downtown core of Shelburne. And this is what the provincial policy statement, the official plan of both the county and Shelburne are recommending is intensification. It doesn't cost the town very much money. In fact, what I've figured out here is the investment in labor and materials on these 5 properties over the last 3 years is $520,000. That's all local labor and materials that were put into those properties. In addition, there's about $200,000 in fees going to the town between development charges and severance and rezoning charges. So, you know, this type of infill development is very good for the town. It doesn't cost any money, and it's creating additional residences for those who need it. Today, some of you will recognize that Prime Minister Trudeau announced $1 billion in new financing to create affordable housing. And he wanted to create 3,000 new units with $1 billion. And if you've done the math on that, which I did today, that's $330,000 per unit. So what I'm telling you is my son and I created 22 units in Shelburne at no cost to the taxpayer. In fact, putting money, $200,000 into the coffers at the end of the day into the town of Shelburne. So this type of development is actually very good. And directly across the road on Mill Street, Mr. Greg Patton severed a lot there and built 2 beautiful semi-detached homes. And the lot sizes are exactly the same as the ones that I'm proposing here. So, you know, there's a lot of precedents already in town for this. The investment in local labor and local materials, of which our friends at Home Hardware in Shelburne have benefited greatly. You know, these are good things for the town of Shelburne. So I'll leave it at that, and I hope council supports this request. Thank you.
Lisa, I see you have your hand up again there.
Yeah, sorry. I just actually had one other comment. So, you know, and I thank you very much for Sandy for bringing up the point of the fact that you and your son are investing within Shelburne. But I think that, you know, what's, you know, perhaps also frustrating for the residents of the specific area is that there was very, very strict guidelines as far as how structures had to be built on their properties. So if somebody like my parents, when they built their garage or when they wanted to put it on their front porch, they had to have very strict guidelines as far as what they were allowed to do in order to maintain the aesthetics of the overall property. And now I find it interesting that there are investors, and let's face it, there's money to be made for yourself, your son, as well in all of this, that you can push forward a bill and you know, in the interest of making sure that you have the investment for yourself. So I understand that maybe there's some tax dollars for the town at the end of the day, and perhaps the town is growing, but it doesn't mean that it has to grow here. There's other places that we can grow and go outside of the town. So again, maintaining the aesthetics of the overall community is really important to the residents. And I think you've heard that. So again, I would really like the council to take into consideration that other, you know, folks have tried to do builds on their own property and were held to extremely tight guidelines. And as the other gentleman, Mr. Weaver, has highlighted, that unfortunately, you haven't met all those standards, that you're actually asking for variances. So, you know, those parameters are put in place, I'm assuming, for a reason. And this bill doesn't meet all those criteria, and there's more exceptions that have to be made. So not only by the residents of this area, but, you know, by the actual council.
If I may, could I share my screen with the group?
Do that, Jennifer.
Yes, you should have the ability to do that.
Okay, let's try this. This is a video of the severance that happened on Jelly Street. And this is the new home that was built there.
I don't see anything.
I
don't see anything.
Andy,
Can you see it?
Correct.
No.
You're not able to see this video?
No, it's just like
Not-
that folder.
Okay. Well, let's try it again.
There we go.
Okay, now we can.
So this is Jelly Street. Some of you know this. This was built by the Metz group. This is another severance on a corner lot. A beautiful home built there. It's not an eyesore. It's not negative to the neighborhood. And frankly, it's quite a beautiful home. So I just wanted to share that because, you know, some of the comments here that you know, whatever's going to be built there isn't going to be fitting with the streetscape is not correct. The town staff will be ensuring that the building is appropriate for the streetscape. And as far as some minor variances, this is not unusual. That's why the Committee of Adjustment is there to accept that. And we, as I said, are building additional rental housing, which is desperately needed all over Canada, let alone Shelburne and Orangeville. So anyway, that's my argument, folks. And if there's any questions that anybody wishes to ask me, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
I will stop sharing this now.
There you go. Steve, I'm finding this a little bit awkward, and I get there's going to be some lines blurred between the consent application, which isn't actually on the table yet, and the zoning application. But 2 points. One, I was wondering from a planning perspective if you could speak to the intensification aspect. You know, Sandy's mentioned that a couple of times, referenced different examples from within the town, but you know, how that applies from a provincial policy point of view.
Certainly. And, you know, we've been through these, several of these previously, and the planning analysis and the planning justification that we go through is very similar. There is a requirement, just for everybody who's interested in this application and similar intensification proposals, that the town accommodate 38% of new residential development in the form of intensification. What that means is that development has to be in some form of redevelopment of a property that's already built, or as an infill of a property that's maybe partially built or underused, or is basically a tear down and rebuild to a much higher density. It's, you know, there are other forms to that as well, such as downtown intensification redevelopment. There are second units, basement apartments, those kinds of things. What we've, through the official plan review and through the review of these applications, what we've come to the conclusion about is that in established neighborhoods that are primarily single and semi-detached, what would be an appropriate form of what we would call gentle intensification? Could be some areas, and one policy option for the town would be to allow a significant redevelopment in those types of areas. For example, in periphery streets like Victoria is kind of a main street in Shelburne and is on the periphery of this neighborhood. So this property is right on the periphery. Would it be appropriate to allow a 3-story apartment or a townhouse or something that's not very typical in the neighborhood? Some municipalities view that as an option. There are no policies that would say that's not permitted. But what we've done in this case is try to encourage and work with property owners to find a more integrated form of intensification. So something that respects the existing built form of the neighborhood, something that keeps the height and kind of envelope of building areas similar to the existing lot fabric, and doesn't totally change the types of dwellings you find in the neighborhood. This particular property is designated medium density residential. My concern is that there could have been a proposal for something much more dense on this property, something that maybe wouldn't fit as well as what is proposed. We found that these corner lot severances and I agree the example shown by Sandy there is a good example, have met with rightfully some concern from the neighborhood, but in the end, with the rigor that we give them in the review process, including legal agreements on lot grading, servicing, drainage, municipal approval and building permit processes, deposits to make sure everything is done properly. And even Heritage Committee review of proposed dwellings where there is some historically significant buildings in the area. We've been able to find a balance to this intensification requirement. And I think this is still an appropriate form of intensification, that contributes to meeting that 38% requirement without doing something completely out of the ordinary for the neighborhood. So you'll see in my report from a planning policy standpoint, there's clear policy direction from all levels that this kind of thing should be supported and encouraged. And that goes right down to the town's official plan. I just want to make one other comment, and that is that does not necessarily mean that every new lot created and every new dwelling sited on a new lot is going to meet exactly the zone standards applicable to, say, a greenfield subdivision. Because what the province and what the county official plan and what the town official plan says is that the zoning bylaw should basically be flexible so that appropriate intensification can be accommodated with appropriate development standards. So I mentioned in this case, we would balance the reduced front and rear yard by having wider side yards. Again, with an effort to respecting some of the character of the area and not jamming units right side by side. For example, or trying to squeeze in 4 or 6 units on the property that might otherwise be considered in the medium density designation. So it is really hard to find a scenario where from a land use planning and policy standpoint, this kind of thing could not be supported. And where that creates, I think, some difficulty for council and the public is that although there may be neighborhood objection to it, there really isn't a land use planning or policy basis to say this should not happen. And it supports optimizing the use of existing infrastructure. And as I say, it is a form of kind of gentle infill that I think works with the existing neighborhood.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to finish off by saying there's more detail to that, obviously, and our reports for both applications provide a planning overview. There is no requirement for council to make a decision on the zoning bylaw amendment application tonight. We have recommended and provided a bylaw for consideration. But we did note that, we didn't have all the public comments yet. So we wanted to give time for both receiving and to reflect on those comments. So, council could simply receive the report and defer the zoning to another meeting if you want more information or more time to consider those comments. And then with the consent application, similarly, we've recommended some consideration of approval with some conditions, typical standard conditions, but with the option to defer if there's any more information that you feel needs to be submitted in order to address any of the comments you've heard tonight.
Okay. So not to get, too hypothetical here, but you mentioned that, more sort of dense intensification could be supported from a planning perspective. Like, would that be townhomes, like that sort of thing?
Exactly. Yeah. The medium density designation would permit a townhome, for example, where you could maybe put 4 units side by side facing Mill Street on this property and demolish the existing home. That's something that, we've seen some proposals and concepts for that kind of thing on other corner lots in town. And we've really tried to discourage what we would call something that's, maybe out of the ordinary for the neighborhood. So we've been successful in getting support from landowners in the development community to look at doing something a little more integrated with the neighborhood, single and semi-detached, and in some cases having some accessory units within as well.
Okay, and then in terms of council's options, in order to sort of oppose this application from kind of a fundamental aspect, we need some planning justifications to support, right?
Correct. I mean, that's what I think is missing here. I can appreciate and understand the local knowledge that's come out of the public comments tonight in respect of things like drainage issues and servicing concerns and those kinds of things. Those are definitely land use planning matters, and we will make sure those are properly addressed through legal agreements. But aside from that, I really haven't heard too much in terms of a land use planning argument, which is what the local planning appeal tribunal, for example, would be looking for as a reason to refuse or defer or have some other outcome for this application.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Anderson and Councillor Bernardo, I see you as well.
Thanks, Mayor Mills. We heard Steve highlight the fact that this proposed development is consistent with the feel and look of the neighborhood. But I wanted to address something that seemed to me to be a common theme in a number of the complaints. And this may not be a fair question for Steve, may in fact be a better question for Sandy. But what I heard over and over again was that somehow these proposed developments have a negative impact by way of pricing on the homes or the value of the homes. I saw the picture and the video that Sandy showed of the look of the home, which I would agree seemed to be a very nice looking home. But could somebody address it? Is there any evidence to suggest that these types of homes that have been approved, some of which of what Steve showed in the diagram, somehow have impacted the value of the homes negatively?
Sandy?
Well, I mean, I'm a realtor, folks. To speak to this as a realtor, I would say no. In fact, newer developments actually help land values. And this, if you look at the streetscape along Mill Street, the frontage of the lot proposed is of actually larger frontage than the rest of the homes along Mill Street. So from an aesthetic view from Mill Street, it's probably going to be looking very, very similar to the homes running east from the laneway. But so there's no evidence that I know that intensification, new development affects land prices or real estate sales prices. Maybe Linda can weigh in on that.
I was just going to ask any further comments on that.
Yeah, I could agree with that. It's anything but negative.
Okay. Councillor Bernardo?
What about when it's...
I guess my question question is for Steve again, but you mentioned the tribunal. There really because there's no planning issue that we can bring to the tribunal. There's no way the town would win at the tribunal. Am I correct in that thought process if it was appealed?
Well, I mean, I can't say the outcome of a potential LPAT hearing or speculate about that. I mean, each LPAT matter is considered on its merits, and the LPAT would probably be the first to say that, and they would consider the argument put before them, and it's obviously given a lot of thought and rigor in the review. But in principle, it's hard pressed for anyone to find a policy in the town's official plan or the county official plan or the growth plan or the provincial policy statement that would say this type of infill intensification should not be supported or is not justified from a policy standpoint. So I have not been able to see anything that would kind of stand up to that test of it's not conforming to some policy. And that's really what I would say would be the focus of the discussion at an LPAT hearing would be, is it meeting all of these criteria and policies that the application is subject to?
And I guess as a follow-up, you said it's 35% intensification that is sort of required in a
38%, yeah, correct. So,
so if we go up to 38%, after 38%, we could start denying intensification?
Not necessarily. I mean, that's a target. Certainly the target, we're monitoring that, and it's not a situation where we're way over achieving it. More intensification exceeding the target is not necessarily a bad thing, though. There could be some really great projects that actually bring the target or bring the number higher than the target. So the target is not really intended as an upper limit. It's a minimum.
Just one final question for me on a very practical level, and I think it was raised actually by the Kendrews, but sewer servicing. I know in some earlier situations where we've dealt with similar sorts of lot severances, we've had to deal with those kinds of issues. What has been considered or decided with respect to servicing here? Are the lines in that back lane, or are they on Victoria Street?
It's very similar to the existing situation for 220 William as well as 221 Owen Sound Street. The sanitary sewer is in the rear lane. So it comes in through the backyard to the existing house. So just like on those lots, in order to service the existing dwelling without going through the new lot for their sanitary service, a service has to be brought out along Mill Street and run to the existing home. And then the existing dwelling can be serviced from the existing sanitary sewer in the rear lane. So it basically come in to its side yard and connect directly to the home. That way you don't have multiple services for different homes running through the same lot. And there's no easements required. We've got everything in the public right of way.
Okay. Councillor Wagner, did I see your hand? And Sandy.
Yes. Thank you. So with regards to the aesthetics and property values, clearly we can all say that it would not necessarily affect them negatively because of, looking hopefully very nice. My question, I guess, would be more of to the proposed usage of this build, which would be a rental unit. I'm not saying anything against people who rent, obviously, but I'm wondering if that will affect the property homes in a little bit of a negative way. If someone can maybe speak towards that.
Well, I could speak to, at this point, we're required to make a proposal, and the proposal was for a raised bungalow that would have 2 units, one on the top floor and one on the lower level. But at this point, that final determination is yet to be made, because at this point, I may just sell the lot and let another builder decide what they want to do on that lot. So the intention would be, for me, if I proceed with building it, was a 2-unit duplex, about 1,100 square foot raised bungalow. And yeah, we know we do need some more rental accommodation in town, and I do have some rental properties, and I think the tenants that I'm aware of are respectful, and whenever we have issues, we deal with them, and yeah, it's possible it could be a rental.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a quick little question for Steve as well. I guess it sort of stems back again to the whole government and what they're imposing. Are we, I guess it's hard to kind of question or phrase this. Why do we ask for the community's input if it kind of means nothing? We're sort of giving them this false sense of they have sort of some form of power over what happens in their neighborhoods, and yet we can't, vote on that aspect, that we're trying to listen to the community, hear what they want to have for their community where they've lived for multiple years. And, it's like, oh yeah, sure, you can say what you want, but it doesn't mean anything anyways. Are we just going through the motions until things change? Like, I feel bad for these community members that think they have a voice when you're basically saying we kind of don't have any say.
So there is, I mean, we don't consult simply because it's required, but I just want to remind council, there is a requirement under the Planning Act to give notice and hold a public meeting. There actually, the legislation has been revised in recent years to not only do that, but to also, explain in notices of decision how public comments have been considered. So I think the objective is to make sure as many people as possible are given the opportunity to comment, are allowed, a voice, and are allowed to speak either in support or objection or even neutrally about the proposal. And with more input, that it may result in a better understanding of the context and a better understanding of what needs to be done to make it work. Some cases you'll get, blanket objections that we won't be happy unless nothing happens, unless this is refused. In other cases, you might get some good suggestions on, could you consider shifting the house to that side of the lot? Could you consider moving the driveway to the front? Could you consider a bungalow instead of a 2-story home? So all of those kinds of things, what we want to find out is what are the issues in the neighborhood? How can we address and respond to those issues? And is there anything that can be done with the proposal to better adapt it to respond to the concerns that are raised?
Okay, very good points. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions from council? Councillor Fegan?
The fact that it's on third, but right close to third line anyway, one of the things that I'd be concerned about would be traffic. And Sandy, maybe you can answer this for me. Have you considered the increase in traffic? If you are going duplex, I know that's not going to increase that much, but being its close proximity to a main entrance into Shelburne, has that been considered?
Yeah, through Mayor Mills to Councillor Fegan, a duplex like this would, the parking requirement would be two-car parking, and I don't believe that 2 cars added to that neighborhood are going to be an issue at all. No, I think the street can absorb two additional cars.
Okay, and your proposal is the driveway, if I understand correctly, is going to be on, was it Victoria that you're planning on putting it on?
No, on the laneway.
A laneway, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. All right, any further questions? Councillor Bernardo?
Sorry, one more question. Sandy, the trees that are currently on the property, especially the mature trees, where you're proposing to build a new development, are we going to try and attempt to keep them as much as possible?
Yes, through Mayor Mills to Councillor Bonato. Yes, we are going to try. There's some mature trees on the east side of the lot, and there is a tree that's actually on town property that is sort of mid-lot at this moment. We will try and keep those trees. There's some overgrown weed-like trees in the let me think now, the northeast corner of the lot that are just weeds that have overgrown. I think we'll be clearing those out. But any existing trees that are on the lot, on the periphery of the lot, we will be keeping, and there are no significant trees in the middle of the lot that would require them to be removed for a new home there.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else from the group? So Steve, your recommendation is that we do approve the amendment?
Yeah, I just noted in my recommendation, subject to the comments received. So I don't have, I haven't had a lot of opportunity, obviously, to reflect on what we've heard tonight and the comments received in writing today and earlier this week. But from a planning, analysis, and policy standpoint, I would still support approval of the zoning. That just has to be with the understanding that the related consent should reach a similar, with the same outcome, because the rezoning doesn't make sense without the consent.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right. So there is a draft motion included in the agenda, which reads, be it resolved that council receives report P 2020-11 for information, and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 43-2020, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 38-2007 as amended by rezoning the lands known municipally as 331 Victoria Street. So based on what we've heard tonight, is there anybody prepared to move and second that motion to move ahead? Moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson. Seconder for that. I'll second it to get it on the floor. All right, so I'll read that again. Be it resolved that council receives report P 2020-11 for information, and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 43-2020, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 38-2007 as amended by rezoning the lands known municipally as 331 Victoria Street. Any further discussion on that before I call the question? All in favor? Sorry, it seems to be a delay here. So all those in favor? Okay, used to be 4. Those opposed? Yeah, I don't know if there's a delay. Jennifer, could we maybe just run through a recorded vote on this?
Yes, sir. A recorded vote has been requested. When I call your name, please indicate yes or no. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Councillor Bonato. Yes. Councillor Parfit.
Yes.
Councillor Fegan. Yes. Councillor Hall.
Yes.
Councillor Wagner. And Mayor Mills.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Okay, thank you. All right, so on to items for consideration. First is a report from our town planner regarding Fieldgate commercial site plans. So Steve, carry us through that.
Yes, I have a short presentation as well, just to provide some graphics, which are also included in my planning report. Okay, so this report is regarding site plan application SPA 2001 for commercial development on the property at 900 Main Street East by Shelburne 89 Developments, known as Fieldgate Homes or Fieldgate Commercial in this case. And we also have two representatives for Fieldgate Commercial here with us tonight. Debbie and Stephanie are here, and I've invited them to attend to help with any questions that may be raised by council in respect of this proposed commercial development. So this is the draft approved plan. There is a separate report in the agenda tonight regarding some small revisions to this draft approved plan, but those revisions do not really affect the commercial block that is the subject of this site plan application. So we've outlined in red the location of the commercial block and the application number there. So that's the location of the plans and images that are proposed for the site. This is a very technical site plan drawing, as it is required to be. So I know it's not that conducive to understanding, exactly what this site would look like in its ultimate build out. But suffice it to say, this is a very significant and large commercial development proposed to the northeast of Highway 89 and County Road 124. This is certainly a much anticipated commercial development. The site has been subject to a lot of discussion and a lot of even previous proposals, and it's good to see a formal proposal submitted now for a site plan application. Normally we would bring a report on such a site plan application to council when a recommendation is ready for consideration of approval, including authorization of a development agreement. Given the significance of this development and council's interest in it, and some of the strategic objectives of having, some mixed commercial development in Shelburne to help balance off the significant residential growth. We wanted to present this both for council's information and to get some feedback on specific items that are identified in my report. So before we get there, what I'd like to do is just highlight a few features of the proposal. The first is that there would be a total of 5 buildings proposed on the site. Now, 3 of them are attached at the north end of the property. So the primary anchor tenant, which would be a grocery tenant, a new Foodland store operated by Sobeys, based on the application information, would be in building A, the largest building, kind of in the northwest corner of the site. And then attached to that is another kind of the second largest single unit in the development, is building B at about 10,000 square feet. And then a mix of sizes of different commercial units, for a variety of different tenants in building C, again, attached to the east side of building B. So that would be the primary and largest, building on the property. There are 2 other outbuildings proposed as well. In the southwest corner, building D would be very similar to building C in that it would accommodate multiple commercial units. We don't know exactly what the tendency of that would be, but a mix of, things like retail stores, restaurants, personal service shops, potentially banks. There's a broad range of uses permitted in the C4 zone that applies to the property, or sorry, the C2 special zone. And then finally, a drive-through restaurant at the southeast corner of the property. That's been identified on the site plan and by Fieldgate as a potential McDonald's restaurant. I know McDonald's has been looking to find a location to come into town for many years now, and Fieldgate has accommodated a drive-through facility and restaurant location on the southeast corner of their site. The balance of the property would be made up of landscaping, parking, loading spaces, certainly for trucking and loading shipping activity at the back of the main grocery store, and for other commercial units. Obviously, you would have, for the grocery component, the cart corrals in the parking area. Some of the islands have been enlarged to allow tree planting and landscaping within them, again, to green up the parking lot. We've also identified the requirement for kind of a continuous network of pedestrian ways through these parking areas, because as you can imagine, the development could carry a significant amount of traffic. So we've identified, those have been identified on the plan on kind of raised medians and painted crossings of the main driving aisles. So one north-south through this area, and then one east-west through this area. And then connecting to future sidewalk along the street and along Main Street and along Street C in the north. 3 points of entry are proposed to the site. 2 of them really for consumer traffic, and 1 of them oriented more towards kind of deliveries and as kind of a secondary access. So there's a new intersection under construction now that would be signalized at Highway 89 east of County Road 124, about 300 meters east of the existing intersection. That will be really a T intersection to start. So this 4th leg that's shown here will not, by our star, is not actually going to be in the immediate intersection configuration. It would be basically a full move intersection for this future street, Street B. That street would be a local street under town jurisdiction, and it would provide driveway access in 2 locations to the commercial site. So a full move, access right here in all directions in front of the main building, and then a right in, right out with a center median down the center of the street in this location. And then, a secondary access point on Street C, which then goes out to County Road 124 via Street A. So those are the entrance locations. We have not received MTO comments on all of these entrance locations yet, but they are consistent with what MTO has been shown in preliminary consultations previously. The last thing I wanted to highlight on this initial site plan drawing is there was previous discussion and a requirement or a recommendation in the Shelburne East Area Transportation Study to have a site interconnection with the existing Wrigglesworth Plaza to the west. So a little bit more on that when we get a few slides further in. Oh, I just realized that this slide may not have been on the screen when I was speaking.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I have a different slide on one screen then. So anyway, here's the buildings, 5 of them total. And then the entrance points shown by these stars, and the future site interconnection with the green circle. So the grocery store A, the next largest retail unit B, C being a mix of sizes of retail and commercial units, D being same as C, basically mix of units, and then E being the drive-through in the southeast corner. Parking area in the center and between these buildings here, loading at the back, and then connection with the plaza to the west. Fieldgates provided through their architect some drawing elevations of the proposed buildings. So this would be kind of the overall design of the food land. So the top image would be what it would look like from the south. So from the parking area and from Highway 89. The second image is more the look of the building from the side, so from County Road 124 area. And then the bottom image, this really would be screened behind a landscape berm with some tree plantings, as well as some fencing for the loading space. This is the back of the building that would face towards Street C. And then beyond that, with some landscaping, there would be a transition to the residential area of the subdivision. These are 3 images that show different elevations for the other buildings attached to Building A. So Building B is a proposed Dollarama retail store. You can see the design or the front elevation of that here. And then the tenancy of the remaining units in Building C has yet to be determined. So some conceptual sign locations and the overall design is shown here. Again, this is the side that would face south towards Highway 89. And then this next image is the north, so facing towards the residential area. Again, this would be tucked behind some fencing and landscaping to provide that interface with the residential area on Street C. And then this is the east elevation, so facing again towards Street B. This is building D. So this is the building that would be located in the southwest corner of the site. And the front of it would look like this, the top image. That would be facing east towards the interior of the site. The south elevation, obviously that's the one that would face out towards Highway 89. It looks like this in the bottom right corner. And the bottom left is what it would look like facing towards the north. And then, this is the back of the building. So this would be kind of tucked in behind the Wigglesworth Plaza, this part, where you have the more functional areas in the middle image. This set of images illustrates the look of the building E, which would be, as I mentioned, potentially the McDonald's drive-through restaurant. That's the tenant that Fieldgate has been working with. And this design may have to be adapted somewhat to make sure it obviously meets the McDonald's requirements, but this is the kind of design that Fieldgate has proposed. So that's a bit of a quick overview of the existing, the proposed commercial development and the site plan and drawings that have been submitted. That is all still under review. We do not have all of the circulation comments. We have provided our planning comments back to Fieldgate. Engineering review is underway. We have a few comments from the county, but we don't have all of them. And we, as I say, the key agency that we're awaiting comments from is the MTO. And regarding the MTO issues, that also relates to the existing plaza located to the west of the property. So you're familiar with the Wigglesworth property, which is this L-shaped plaza, the Tim Hortons in the north part of the plaza, the beer store in the south, and then other commercial tenants in the middle. The drive-through goes around the back. You can see a few cars lined up in the drive-through there in the air photo. And then outside of that, there's another lane. I point all that out because it relates to the discussion around site interconnection with the existing, with the proposed Fieldgate development. The driveways into the existing plaza include a right-in, right-out into the 802 Main Street, which is Wigglesworth Plaza, another right-in, right-out closer to the intersection here. So there's a raised center median on Main Street that prevents left turns into the plaza. And then there's a full move driveway that goes into the site closer to the Tim Hortons. So I point all that out again because the issue of site interconnection is something I want some council discussion and questions on because it's something that we have to determine through the site plan application for this property. And it relates to the Shelburne East area study where a raised center median has been recommended down the county road. We don't know the timing of when that raised center median will go in. We do know that over time with traffic growth on the county road, left turns into and out of the plaza become increasingly difficult. In fact, on some days and at certain hours of the day, you probably find it already is quite difficult. So those medians help to protect, those turns and make sure that traffic moves efficiently and people aren't sitting there for long lengths of time to turn left, either in or out of the plaza. What that would mean is that the access to the plaza would be very restricted, via the existing driveways. So the Shelburne East Area Transportation Study, which was done in 2012, jointly with MTO and the county, recommended that there be a site interconnection to allow traffic from this plaza or going to it to access the new intersection on 89 and potentially the new intersection on 124. This is the image of the recommended plan or an excerpt from it from the Shelburne East Area Transportation Study or SEAT study as we've referred to it. It shows, the new street that will go in as part of the Fieldgate subdivision east of 124 with the signalized intersection here. It shows that there should be some internal circulation to provide some connection with the existing plaza. And it shows Street X, which is actually Street A on the Fieldgate plan, which is the new intersection on County Road 124. And then of course it shows the raised center medians that are recommended in the ultimate, build out of the area, including in front of the driveway on the existing Wigglesworth Plaza property. So to give you a bit more about this issue, this drawing shows the approved site plan for the existing Wigglesworth Plaza, and we've just highlighted in blue the drive-through route and in red the lane that goes outside of that. And what Fieldgate has shown is that they could make provision, it may be with some grading challenges, but they can make provision for an exit from the Wigglesworth Plaza site here, which would then allow traffic to access either intersection and to come into the plaza here. And there would be a stop bar here so that anyone coming into the plaza site would have to stop, respect the drive-through traffic, respect anyone going around the building. And then in order to access the drive-through, and I think this is the key point, they would have to drive around the building in the red lane, and then they would have to come back to the drive-through. So not ideal in terms of traffic circulation. We all know that Tim Hortons is a busy drive-through facility, but unfortunately due to grading and the configuration of that existing plaza, this is about the only option that exists if site interconnections to be required. If it is not to be required and if it is not accommodated in the future, the outcome of that could be that the plaza, if that median goes on 124, has very restricted access. So either scenario may result in some, drivers who have some concerns, and people who picking up their daily coffee or going to the beer store may have some concerns about the access. But it's really trying to deal with an existing deficient situation with respect to the plaza and its entrances. So that's an overview of the issues. I don't want the interconnection issue to take away in any way from the very important commercial development that we presented here. We do not have a lot to offer yet at this point in terms of comments or direction with respect to staff review. We know that there will be some revisions likely to the site plan before you see it in its final form. But overall, I think the layout is there, and we just need to get the remaining review comments to feed to Fieldgate to respond to. So in terms of the recommendations from our report, we recommend receiving our report for information. One issue that's covered off in the report that I'll just briefly highlight here is Fieldgate did obtain approval of a rezoning for their site, a site-specific rezoning in November. And what the Planning Act says is that if council doesn't want to further change zoning requirements or allow any variances, they can restrict applications to do so within 2 years of that rezoning. Obviously at that time, last November, Fieldgate didn't have all the details of their site plan application. What we're simply recommending here is that if Fieldgate determines that they do need some variances to reduce side yards or other things as part of this site plan process, that we should allow those applications to be filed and processed, and then we'll determine a recommendation from that process. And those, of course, would be subject to the normal public consultation and meeting requirements. And then finally, we are asking for some council direction with respect to this Shelburne East Area Transportation or SEAT study recommendation back in 2012 about allowing or providing for a commercial site interconnection with the existing plaza. The last point I'll make on that and overall is MTO provided preliminary comments. Those comments are different from what the Shelburne East Area Transportation Study said and what they supported back in 2012, in that from an initial review, MTO is saying they would not support the site interconnection. The primary concern being the drive-through and potentially people cutting into it from the adjoining commercial property, and the existing Wigglesworth driveways potentially being used to access the larger commercial development, which MTO would obviously prefer not to have any additional traffic use those driveways beyond what the plaza generates. So there's pros and cons to it. We have the 2012 study. I think the recommendations are still valid in that not a lot has changed from the review, but we do have more details and more information to work with now. So with that, I'm happy to try to address any questions from council regarding the site plan and the recommendations.
Councilor Bernardo? You're muted, Walter.
Love Zoom, always muted. I have a question, Steve. Can that interconnection be moved a little bit further north? Does it have to be where it is?
How do you do that?
Through you, Mayor Mills, to Councillor Bernardo, because of grading issues that location was identified by the design engineers working with Fieldgate, we'll certainly pose that question back to them to see if it could be more of a straight in to that north lane to reduce the amount of travel required around the building. To review that further, and they did, though, from a grading and engineering perspective, look at different options, and this was the one that they suggested that provision could be made for from a grading perspective. So I think the challenge is, again, the grading differential changes as you move along that boundary between the properties.
And I guess my other questions are concerning the Wigglesworth Plaza, the traffic. If I don't have that particular slide, I think it was C1, C2, if I remember right, the entrances. They're only, with the medium, the only traffic that can get in there is traffic coming from the east or traffic coming from the north on 124. Because traffic coming from the west or from the south can't, well, I guess from the south they can get in there. If they continue along County Road 11 up north to 124. But I mean, it's basically limiting the amount of traffic. The one that's closest to the intersection, to the lights, does MTO have any comment about maybe shutting that one down completely? Because that is a terrible one when people are trying to get out, and that's right into that turn lane going on 124.
And I should have highlighted through presenting that the 2012 seat study graphic that you saw, where it does show driveways A1 and A2. Driveway A1 was actually required to be closed by the MTO when the Wigglesworth Plaza was redeveloped. So A1 actually no longer exists. And that speaks to, again, the importance of that county road driveway into the Tim Hortons Wigglesworth Plaza, because it also feeds as a shared access the Esso gas station property next to it. So there, in total, for those two properties at 800 and 802 Main Street, you know, the Esso and the Wigglesworth Plaza, there are 3 existing driveways feeding that, 2 on Main Street, which are right in, right out only, and then the one on County Road 124, which accommodates currently all turning movements.
Okay, that's it for now.
Okay. Councillor Fegan?
With the integration of the into the parking lot for the Wigglesworth Plaza, is there a possibility not only of that one they've got that they indicated, but is there a reason why we couldn't incorporate a second one to the north of the Wigglesworth Plaza?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the commercial site that Fieldgate has filed the site plan application for actually doesn't extend all the way over to the county road. There's another future development block north of the existing Wigglesworth Plaza that would be, it could be a range of things. So it's designated for mixed medium or high density residential, and with allowing for a mix of commercial there as well. What the MTO and the county discussed and what was recommended from the Shelburne East area study when that was done back in 2012 is that any entrance off of the county road into this development site, the Fieldgate subdivision, should be on a public road, or is required to be on a public road, and would have to be as far from Highway 89 as it can be. So unfortunately, unless MTO were to change its standards or give some relief, they won't allow any kind of driveway entrances into the Fieldgate property between the Wigglesworth driveway on 124 and the new intersection that would go to the north.
Sorry, I guess I was a little confusing there. I don't mean off of 124. I mean actually connecting the Wigglesworth Plaza, which essentially is the
Oh,
back.
okay, right.
Their medium density. Is there?
Oh, so connected northwards through the, yeah, sorry, I misunderstood. Because we don't know what that development block is going to entail, and it may entail something like medium density residential. It was discussed with Fieldgate about having that as your point of interconnection. But I believe the preference there was to join it with the commercial site instead of a residential, potentially a residential site. I think that there's a grading issue there as well to the north, but we will review that further with the engineers working with Fieldgate.
I was going to say, is there any reason why we couldn't at least pose the question to them or ask
Right.
it?
Yeah, we'll look at it further. Yeah.
I just figured 2 entrances in there will certainly alleviate some of that congestion that they're talking about and the cutoffs of access to that plaza.
Right.
Councillor Wagner.
Thank you very much, Mayor Mills. I think what everyone's sort of not necessarily forgetting, but has anyone actually driven through that Tim Hortons drive-through? Like, this is crazy to me. I can't even believe this is being suggested. When you get to the end of the drive-through there and you're about ready to turn to exit the drive-through, that turning radius right there is already, in my opinion, small. And now we're going to actually be creating almost a laneway with people who are going to be coming down, parallel to that drive-through. Oh my gosh, you're going to have accidents for sure, because people are not going to be yielding. They're not going to be giving the right of way to the drive-through. And you're going to have both people coming to that very small turning radius potentially at the same time. And unless, we take out the parking spaces along the I guess it would be considered maybe the west side or of that in front of Tim Hortons there. So that creates a larger turning radius for both lanes, because you've now essentially created 2 lanes. There's also 2 garbage bins there as well. So, I mean, if we're going to take out where those garbage bins are and take out that row of parking, then I think it maybe could work. But if you're going to leave that parking there, it's already really difficult to get out of the drive-through. And when there's people backing out of those spaces on both sides, and then the driveway as it is to enter that parking or that Wigglesworth Plaza is already very narrow. So I know myself with a truck, when we go to pull in, when we're making a right-hand turn, if someone's exiting, we usually have to wait or we bump the curb. So, creating that connecting link there where you're going to be sending people down and around, parallel to the drive-through, you're going to have to look at removing those bins and those parking spaces in order to make it work. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a disaster. Or, as I've mentioned before, which I don't think MTO will approve, creating another exit. But even then, now you're getting an exit right straight from the drive-through, but you're still having people come around as a lane. So that probably wouldn't work either. So I guess just my concerns are that turning radius and the fact that we have parking there. So that would be something to take back to Tribute for sure. Please.
Fieldgate, yeah. I'm with you, Councillor Wagner. I mean, I don't want to take the commercial interconnectivity off the table, because I think it's critical to this, but unfortunately, I mean, where it's proposed on these drawings tonight, I just don't see being workable. And then, I mean, I agree. I think it will only serve to make the problem worse. Trying to funnel more traffic into that tight area, sort of halfway through the drive-through, and then expecting cars to go all the way around to enter back into the drive-through, I just think is unrealistic. There's already so much going on in that tiny space to begin with, that creates sort of a chaotic driving situation that I think that will only serve to exacerbate that. So yeah, I think we're all going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board, and I appreciate the fact, you know, that there's grading issues and whatnot involved, but that there has to be a better option available than that, I would think. But I agree, Steve. I think we need to keep that on the table, because not doing anything isn't an appropriate course of action either. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, because I wasn't around at that point, but when the council of the day initially sort of approved the redevelopment of Wrigglesworth, wasn't there always some sort of longer term anticipation that, you know, that entrance and exit at Tim Hortons onto 124 would not be temporary, but, you know, would be solved at some point in time down the road by the future development of what's now the Fieldgate lands?
That's correct, Wade. That was the intent, because I was there in 2012. And going back to my thought process, I know personally, I thought it was going to go into where they have the development land to the north, rather than going through where the current drive-through. That was always our thought process at that point in time, that it was going to be to the very north and interconnecting there. And that would, you know, might even help alleviate some of the issues if you have the interconnecting link through the development land. Would help with the issue of that turn radius as well, because instead of having to turn into the parking area, they could turn to the north and go out that way instead of going to the south. That was always our thought process. It wasn't that we were thinking they were going to go right into the drive-through for Tim Hortons. That was not our thought. And that's why I said, can it be moved further north rather than where it is?
Okay, Steve?
So one point that I wanted to mention as well is that, you know, at the time when this was first considered, the land to the north of the plaza was going to be part of the commercial plaza development that the previous owner had put forward. So basically, over the course of the last 8 years since that recommendation was created, the issue, including through the recent Fieldgate draft plan process, was continued to kind of push to the next level of design and detail to figure out how it could work, but still with the concept remaining that it would be accommodated in some form. Over time, what's happened is the options, the range of options have become narrower, and certainly some of the options that we might suggest Fieldgate look at then restrict the options for either their current commercial site proposal or the medium to high density block to the north of the plaza. And I think those are the concerns. What I will say is it's not necessarily an imminent problem in that there are no plans, as I say, to put that median in the county road. We don't know the timing of that. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 or even more years. What we were thinking is that through this site plan process, if provision is to be made for site interconnection, that the agreement for the site should provide a course for that to happen when the related improvements are done on the county road, so that there's a contingency plan, not necessarily that would be built immediately, but when the traffic needs dictate, it would go in. But I hear all the concerns about the location and share in those concerns. The other reason for bringing this forward at this time is there still remains from that 2013 site plan for Wrigglesworth Plaza some deficiencies. And those deficiencies relate to the interface of the grading with the Fieldgate property. They did not properly grade that. They were supposed to put retaining walls around the edges of their property, which they did not. Now that Fieldgate is into more detailed grading work, there's an opportunity to get this graded in a way that works for the Fieldgate site. And if that grading work is done in a way that there's no way to accommodate site interconnection, that kind of prejudices the issue. So we need to know sooner than later if this interconnection is going to be required from the town's perspective, so we can take that position to MTO and then work with Fieldgate to figure out how to design it and where to put it. And so what I've presented tonight in terms of location is the initial submission from Fieldgate, and we can certainly take all the comments from tonight back to Debbie and Stephanie and their team, and then look at whether there's other scenarios that could be presented and considered. If council's preference and direction is to continue to work on this. The other option being, doesn't seem to be a practical option. We won't require that as part of this site plan development. And that may be the outcome with MTO, as they ultimately, I think, get to call the shots on this. But I think MTO, in order to make final and formal comment on that, is waiting for the town to establish some formal position or reconfirm the position from 2012.
I think, Steve, that would be my preference, that at this point we reaffirm our support for interconnectivity, at least notionally, but with the understanding that I think a fair bit of fine tuning has to be done in terms of where that's going to go and what it's going to look like. But I think we should, as I said earlier, definitely leave that on the table for further development. But, Deputy Mayor Anderson, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the comments that I probably would have made were shared by yourself and Councillor Wagner. I mean, I'm all about facilitating development. I certainly understand the concerns of Fieldgate here. As I'm looking at the map, that's what I'm looking at right now. But to me, that entryway is dead on arrival from my standpoint. And to answer Councillor Wagner, I'm certainly familiar with that location. I've been to the drive-through many times. Either you're going to have to insert traffic signals or get a helmet, because it's going to be bumper cars right around that turnway. And I think inside, to your point, Mayor Mills, expecting these vehicles to come around inside the development and then go around the driveway is just really outrageous, considering the amount of traffic that's already there. I just don't see that happening at all. And to me, I think you're just facilitating a really dangerous situation. And so, yes, interconnectivity in the sense that, sort of traffic relief and connection between the two developments. But to your point, it would have to be somewhere else. It just cannot be there.
Councillor Hall.
Again, not to overly belabor the point, but that secondary driveway is also where goods and services are delivered. So you've got trucks stopping in early mornings and such, doing their deliveries, which means it's no longer even an option.
Garbage trucks, I think, too.
There's garbage trucks. There's also the materials that are being delivered to Tim Hortons. They stop on that driveway as well, do their unloading, etc.
Okay. On a positive note, flipping back to just the commercial concepts in front of us, I'm very pleased with what I see. A question for Debbie in terms of the other commercial units that aren't identified on the drawings. Have you had much interest yet? Like, are there any concerns that you're going to have difficulty filling those units, or do you have a fairly long list of prospective tenants lined up that are willing to entertain a draft to find a spot?
Yes, can I speak?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Mayor, yes, we do have strong interest. However, we are going through a pandemic, and the sooner we can start construction, the better. We have Foodland, as Steve had mentioned. We have Dollarama. This is going to be catered as a neighborhood commercial site. We do this a lot throughout, I guess, the GTA, expanded GTA. So you'll have a food store, Dollarama, I think it's Pet Value, McDonald's. We're trying to secure some other restaurants. But the sooner we can start our, the sooner the tenants see movement, the more interest we get when, it shows that development is imminent and you get a lot of tenants interested. So we plan to build this in one phase, and we're hoping to start construction in the spring and hopefully have some businesses open by the end of next year.
Excellent. Excellent. think that's welcome news to the whole community. So,
We're very excited. We're very excited.
good stuff. And any other questions or comments for Steve or for Debbie?
Sorry. Steve, I was going to ask on the streets. So our, if I can go back, street A, the one to the furthest north that connects to street C coming off 124, that's all going to be built right away so that the truck traffic coming in to load or go out are going to be able to go out to 124 rather than 89 at signalized lights. I'm just trying to understand if the three streets are going to be built at the same time.
So obviously the entrance off 89 is happening earlier. That there's construction work on the highway happening now. In order to get the street off of the county road built, well, we need the final detailed design for the engineering plans for the subdivision to be finalized and approved, and the development agreement to be entered into for the construction of that road. My understanding from Debbie and Mara and the Fieldgate team is that they are looking to build the streets in the first phase, both the street A and B, so the two main entries into the subdivision. Other local streets further back into the residential portion might be future phases, but I see we have Mara actually who's looking at more of the overall subdivision coordination. She may be able to speak more to the plans in terms of whether all the streets get built immediately or whether it would be kind of phased.
I'm more interested in street A, C, and whatever, the ones.
B, yeah.
B.
Hi, Mara.
Mara's listening.
I'm here.
Oh, you're there?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Mills. The intent is to, if we want to call it a phase one, focus on the infrastructure that's going to support the commercial block specifically as a priority. So that would be, like Steve mentioned, the access road that's being built off of 89, the connection out to 124, and then that ring road, I believe it's Street C, that would allow for the truck turn movements to facilitate the goods and service drop-offs, goods and service movements into the plaza. And then obviously the swim pond is built in that first phase to accommodate drainage, and we would then focus our efforts throughout the remainder of the site as it progresses and as the market allows.
So you've answered my question. That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Mara.
Welcome.
Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thanks, Mayor Mills. First of all, thanks, Debbie and Mara, for the excellent work. I think, Mayor Mills, you're absolutely right with respect to the positive news. It was sounding doom and gloom for a second, but I'm tremendously happy with what your team is doing in this area. But my question is, this was raised before, and I don't remember, Steve, Mara, whether we agreed that this would be examined or it sort of fell off the rails, but there was some discussion about maybe extending or creating a sidewalk. So for the I guess the exit out to 124 from the development, maybe a sidewalk up to the traffic signal that goes into the Waynesboro or the new subdivision, the Lakeview subdivision. Is there an opportunity to work with the county potentially and have that sidewalk created?
Through you, Mayor Mills, to Deputy Mayor Anderson. That's something we hope to work through further with the county through the county transportation master plan, and specifically figure out what the design would look like for a sidewalk along the west side of the county road, as well as, or if it's going to be on the east side, but more likely the west side. And then what the timing might look like in terms of an actual project to implement that. That is not, though, a subdivision requirement for the Fieldgate development. One of the conditions of the Fieldgate development is to install sidewalk on the east side of 124 from their street entrance down to the existing intersection. There have been some design challenges with that, particularly across the frontage of the existing plaza. But we're working through that both with Hassan on behalf of Fieldgate as well as the county engineers. But yeah, that north section of sidewalk all the way up to Wansboro Way, we really don't have more information yet on potential timing. We have had discussions with county staff about whether it would be supported in terms of a joint project, and when they do any future road work that we could accommodate multi-use trail or sidewalk or something along those lines. And they seem supportive in principle. It all comes down to timing and details and cost, obviously. So it's to be determined. Yeah.
So are you saying there's potentially an opportunity to coordinate that effort with the development of the Fieldgate, right?
No, I don't foresee that happening with the Fieldgate site, like north of their site entrance. I would foresee it happening as a separate project with the county. And the county's suggested, or we've discussed with the county, that it might be the opportune time might be when there's other improvements along the county road.
Okay.
And we don't know, unfortunately, the timing of that, though. It's not likely to be as early as the improvements associated with the Fieldgate development.
Okay. And sorry, my last question, I think it's a commercial plot that is right there at the intersection of Waynesboro and 124. Any activity on that? I think the last time you spoke about it was they were taking a wait and see approach, waiting for further, I guess, growth in the area before they make a move. Anything has changed on that, as far as you know?
We have not had any proposals or applications from TribeCap on those blocks, unfortunately. Things have been quiet on those two blocks. I think that, the conditions, as Debbie has mentioned, probably play into that somewhat, like the economic conditions tied to the pandemic and the transition to online shopping. But I also think the development of this Fieldgate site will then give people more confidence who own the other commercial sites of what their options are, as nobody really wants to compete with the primary kind of node at the main intersection with a similar type of retail outlet. So I think other landowners with commercial property are being a bit strategic and wait and see on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the draft motion included in the agenda is sort of three parts, as Steve had indicated in his report. The first part simply is to receive the report that we've just gone through. The second part deals with those proposed minor variance applications that may come in, and then the third part is essentially just asking for council to confirm our support of, as I said, notionally at least, the commercial interconnectivity between Wigglesworth and Fieldgate Plaza. It's not committing us to the proposal on the table as of tonight, but just in general, so that those discussions can take place. So it's a rather lengthy draft motion included there. Do you want me to read it through, or can I just ask for a mover and a seconder for that?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Is there any further discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. So the next report, again from Steve, is regarding an application for a change of conditions and red line revisions to the draft plan of subdivision from Fieldgate as well. So Steve, do you want to take us through that one?
Yes, and I promise these presentations get quicker as we go. So the next one is related in some ways to the previous one, in that it's the same development, 900 Main Street, Fieldgate subdivision. Everyone knows where the site is. This is the draft plan that was approved last November. It incorporated a total of 250 residential units, and you can see the mix summarized on the right-hand side of the slide. And you can also see that there is a future medium high density commercial block. I just wanted, that was not really part of the red line revisions submitted for consideration tonight, but I just want to highlight that that 250 does not include whatever units may come forward in that block in the future. So that would be through a separate planning application to detail what would be proposed there. But the servicing allocation and the draft plan approved back in November has the number 250 tied to it as in terms of the total units. As I say, some minor adjustments, and this stemmed really from the detailed engineering design and some further review of road alignments relative to the highway that resulted in some minor tweaking. You can see the red lining here. And then the other objective that Fieldgate has brought forward, or change that's brought forward, is an opportunity to alter the proposed frontages of the street townhouses, which results in 8 additional townhouse units that can be accommodated through the combination of these 6 blocks between street C, A, and B, and these, what was 2 blocks of 8 townhouse units, or 8 and 6, proposed to be intensified to 3 blocks of 6 units. The red lines also illustrate a slight shift south of street E, which actually has the benefit of enlarging the park block somewhat, and then straightens out and avoids any lots backing out towards the highway. So all the lots would face east, west, or front towards the highway. So you don't have any rear yards in that oriented in that direction. By reconfiguring street E in that manner, 1 single attached unit is dropped. So the net increase in units with these red line changes would be 7 units. So going from 250 to 257. This is just a clean colored copy of the revised draft plan submitted. Again, not any real material or substantive changes in terms of the overall layout, minor adjustment to the street E configuration and location, enlargement of the park block, intensification of the townhouse units to accommodate 8 more units, and some corresponding adjustments to the second smaller commercial block, the stormwater block. And street F has been straightened out a little bit over here as well. So relatively minor changes. We are recommending that those red line revisions be approved as minor changes to the draft plan of subdivision. One of the results of those changes is that there's some block and lot renumbering that has to be worked through the draft plan conditions. So the red line draft plan conditions are attached to my report, and you can see the minor edits tracked in the document. The number of units also increasing from 250 to 257. And then finally, that 7 additional dwelling units be allocated in terms of servicing capacity to increase the total allocation from 250 to 257. So I think that covers the main points, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Any questions for Steve? Again, the draft resolution there is rather lengthy. I have a mover and seconder for it. Steve just it does. Okay, moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hall. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Excellent. Great. Okay, and the last report for our special meeting is third report from Steve regarding the part lot control exemption application for the Highland Village subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So council will recall there was a previous part lot control exemption bylaw approved for this subdivision. I think it was in the early summer. Basically, the part lot control exemption process, just as a reminder, takes larger townhouse lots and blocks and creates the internal lot lines that divide the units of attached buildings, so that each unit has its own lot and so that the lot lines are aligned to the common wall between the units. So this plan just highlights the townhouse blocks in green and the semi-detached lots in yellow, 22 semi-detached and 7 townhouse blocks. Of course, we've received and reviewed the detailed reference plans for those. Again, this is just showing the parts that each lot and block would be divided into. Nothing new in terms of the total units in the subdivision. What I just wanted to highlight here is that there are some easements associated to some of these lots, including on this reference plan along Clark Street. These semi-detached lots have a drainage easement already registered along their back lot line for a common drainage swale. That allows town access and maintenance if required to remove any obstructions. And then a new type of easement required under the supplementary subdivision agreement is a acoustic fencing easement. So basically these lots facing out towards the west, they back on the property owned by IK World, where there was an industry at one point. And there is continuing some smaller scale industrial operations. 2.5 meter high acoustic fence will be along this rear lot line. The agreement stipulates the property owners are responsible for maintaining that fence in perpetuity after the developer is relieved of its maintenance obligations. But in order to secure that and make sure the town has the ability to go in and make repair, the easement would allow access by the town if a landowner fails to make that repair, and then that cost could be assigned back to that landowner and added to their taxes if it came to that situation. So it's kind of hopeful that that easement will never have to be used, but it's there as a contingency if all other options fail for repair of fencing. These lots are internal to the development and do not have any noise easement, but do have a drainage easement. Similar townhouse block here, showing how it would be divided into 7 lots with a drainage easement along the back. I also want to just remind council, there are rear yard entrances doors from the back of the garages into these townhouse lots. So that's what these easements in the middle represent. Same for these townhouses. And this is the one I really wanted to highlight for council because these are the only townhouse blocks in the development. 3 blocks, 14 townhouse units total, where the interior units, because of the unit design, would not have access to their rear yard through their garage. That was raised, and I bring up this slide to illustrate the concept. One thing we should consider is whether the town will require what's called rear yard access easements. I've highlighted in blue the location of what would be the town's acoustic fence maintenance easement, if required. 3 meter easement at the back, again, as that contingency for town access. If rear yard access is to be facilitated, it would likely look something like this as an example for this block specifically. It would be an easement over the side yard of one of the end units and an easement across the backyard of as many rear yards as possible as required to gain access to this one unit. So for example, if the holder of this unit wanted to get some post hole diggers in their backyard to put in a deck or something along those lines, they would have the ability to send that contractor down that person's side yard and across that easement. And of course, if any damage was caused by them, they would have to repair it, but they would have that access. If that rear yard maintenance easement or access easement is not accommodated or not required by the town, each unit holder would either have to rely on informal arrangements with their neighbor or taking equipment that you can be taken through their unit. The only precedent we have for this issue in town is the Summerhill development. And in that development, no rear yard access easements were required by the town. The pros and cons of that were considered, and the council of the day decided not to require them. In this case, the only unique issue here is that the easement in part would overlap the town's easement. And legal counsel for the town has just flagged. In that circumstance, we have to be careful with wording and so forth to make sure it's clear to the unit holders that the town is not obligated to facilitate access amongst the homeowners. It's an agreement and an easement amongst those homeowners. The town's easement is separate from that. So just a risk that, however small it may be, that with overlapping easements in that way, you may get residents coming to the town saying, well, you have an easement too, you should be making sure it's clear for access. And, you know, they may have higher expectation of the town to get them their access. So I present that because there are 3 blocks and it's not part of our recommendations, but if council has any questions, comments, or concerns on that point regarding rear yard access, we'd certainly entertain them and help to use that input as direction back to Tribute on whether rear yard access easements will be accommodated and facilitated or not. But other than that, the recommendation is to receive the report. I would note that I think the resolution in the council agenda referred to P2020-04, and that's an error from our report. It's P2020-14, and to approve the part lot control exemption bylaw 44-2020. So that's my report, and I'm available for questions.
So Steve, if we entertain the rear yard access easement, does that then preclude the property owners from continuing their side yard fencing all the way to the back lot line? Like, would it have to stop short to allow, like, you know, actual movement along that easement? Correct. So, and that was one of the considerations in the Summerhill development. They would either have to stop the fence at that line, or they would have to have a gate. Install a gate, yeah. Yeah. And that would have to be all the way along. Yeah, and I will mention too, for the town's purposes, when the town gains access to these rear yards, if it's ever needed for any kind of maintenance activity, what we typically do is remove the necessary fence panels if they're obstructing the easement and put them back in like condition or better after the fact. But we wouldn't use the town easement as a reason to preclude side yard fences. Yeah, yeah. And the town's access obviously would be much less frequent and periodic. Yeah. Thoughts from the group? Yes, Steve. So, sorry, if I can just raise one other thing. When we discussed this among staff and with legal counsel, the question was raised, have there been issues in the Summerhill development? There's been a handful. Purchasers who didn't realize they only had access through their unit, or that their neighbor wasn't obligated to give them access. And so they were looking to get fences or decks or post holes drilled, and they had no way to get there. So in some cases, I think they're making it work and neighbors are getting along and allowing access. In other cases, it's not working, and we have homeowners struggling to figure out a way to do what they want to do in their backyards, and clearly haven't been adequately informed. I'm not saying that's across the board, but in some cases, as time goes on and the unit turns hands several times, new purchasers are maybe not aware of whether there's an easement or not. So we've had to clarify with those handful of homeowners that in fact, they don't have any legal access through their neighbors' properties, and that the town doesn't have a role to facilitate that. Yeah. So pros and cons, and I wouldn't recommend one or the other. I'd say it's really an option that we could go either way. Do you want an answer tonight on that from us? Not necessarily formal direction, but any comments or questions. And if there are none and you want to leave it to staff, I'm happy with that as well. Any thoughts from the group?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand, Steve. I apologize. One of the options was this easement that would allow that backyard access, and not necessarily through the units, but it wouldn't be us that would be responsible for that. And so to me personally, I mean, certainly we could defer this to a later date. I think I would prefer that option, and I understand the concerns that was raised by legal, but it would appear to me that that could be mitigated by the language that you spoke of, to make it clear as to the responsibility. I think leaving it to the sort of neighbors to sort of get along or not. I mean, we still have neighbors that are fighting over fencing in my subdivision, for crying out loud. And so under utopian circumstances, you would like to believe that neighbors would be getting along and sharing access. But I don't think that's what we should be facilitating. So I think I would prefer to go with the other option, with the mitigation of the language to ensure that people that are clearly aware that we're not responsible for facilitating that access.
But with an easement provided, but it's among homeowners.
Correct, correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on that? Could we go so far, Steve, as to stipulate that the gates be included there? Because I mean, I would understand some residents on the part of homeowners that only have fences that go part of the way back. I mean, they would still want to secure their backyards. So I mean, there could be gates on either side that are locked, but on the basis that if a neighbor needs to exercise his or her rights over that easement, then those have to be unlocked temporarily to allow that to occur.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it provides a legal avenue to assert the right of access if all other avenues fail. So, we hope, common sense prevails and people figure it out, but it really, if it gets to that point where no other option has succeeded, then, that interior unit holder would have the right to basically assert the access and require the other owners to remove whatever obstructions are in their way. We could, I think, stipulate in the language that gates are to be provided if fencing is installed, or prohibit fences altogether. In the end, though, if the homeowners all agree, they could agree to modifying the language, and the town wouldn't really be a party to that. It's amongst the homeowners in terms of the easement.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think my preference would be, rather than prohibit fences, I think I'd
allow for gates. Yeah.
Prefer the gate
unlocked. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's helpful.
All right. So in terms of the motion, then reads, be it resolved, the council receives report P 2020-14 for information, and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 44-2020, being a bylaw to designate certain lands within registered plan 7M74, town of Shelburne, as exempt from part lot control. The mover and seconder for that. By Councillor Fegan, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, items number 4 and 5 were deferred previously. The mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw. Moved by Buffett, seconded by Wagner. All in favor? That's carried. And just before we adjourn, just a reminder, we do have committee of adjustment following right after the adjournment of this special meeting. What I am going to suggest is that we take a quick 5-minute break to use the washroom, fill up any drinks you may need, and then we'll come back and convene a committee of adjustment meeting. The mover and seconder to adjourn the special meeting. Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? Carried. All right, so I have 9:01, so let's try to be back as close to 9:06 as we can be.